Nishka adjusted her environmental visor for the third time that morning, ensuring not a centimeter of her face was visible. To the humans working around her, the specialized helmet was technically unnecessary in the standard atmosphere of Helio Station, but it gave her the shield she desperately needed behind its tinted surface. Her luminous yellow eyes tracked the movements of the research team as they processed the latest botanical samples. Nishka, could you analyze these pollen structures? Dr. Tanner's voice carried across the lab, professional but distant. Yes, Dr. Her voice translator rendered her sibilant Sarvoxian speech into smooth, accentless standard, another layer of separation between herself and them. As she moved toward the analysis station, Nishka caught her reflection in a darkened monitor, the sleek helmet with its curved visor revealing nothing of the iridescent emerald scales that covered her face, the pronounced ridges above her eyes, or the delicate frills that lined her jaw, features that even among her own people marked her as peculiar, too sharp, too prominent, distinctive. Her family had diplomatically called her appearance humans she was certain would find her monstrous. The xenobiology internship had seemed like a perfect opportunity. 6 Earth months aboard an international research station studying interspecies botanical adaptation. Nishka had jumped at the chance to work with the renowned Dr. Tanner. She hadn't anticipated how isolating it would be. At the analysis station, Nishka found a surprise waiting. Someone had already calibrated the equipment precisely to Sarvaxian visual spectrum preferences. Next to the microscope sat a small toolkit with the specific instruments she preferred. This wasn't the first time such thoughtfulness had manifested. It had been happening regularly over the past 3 weeks. I thought you might need these, came a quiet voice from behind her. Nishka turned to find Eliasai, one of the station's maintenance engineers. He stood with his hands in the pockets of his utility jumpsuit, dark curly hair disheveled as always. His brown eyes met her visor with a directness few humans attempted. Thank you, she said, her translator flattening the gratitude that vibrated in her throat pouches. How did you know I needed the spectrometric calibrator? Elias shrugged. A human gesture she had learned indicated casual dismissal. I noticed how you adjusted the equipment last time. Seemed inefficient to make you recalibrate every session. He paused, then added, besides, everyone should have tools that work for them, not against them. Nishka's inner eyelids fluttered in surprise. Behind her visor, was this simply professional courtesy or something more personal? She couldn't tell, and years of ridicule from her own kind had taught her to suspect the worst. The equipment functions adequately now, she said stiffly. Elias nodded, seemingly unfazed by her formality. Good. Oh, and the atmospheric regulators in this section are scheduled for maintenance tomorrow. Nothing to worry about, but there might be some temperature fluctuations I can postpone if it would interfere with your research. No interference. Sarvactions adapt to temperature variations easily, right? He lingered a moment longer than seemed necessary. Well, if you need anything else, just let me know. As he walked away, Nishka felt an unfamiliar twinge on her home world. No one had ever paid such attention to her needs or preferences, yet here was this human consistently anticipating what would make her work easier. She turned back to the samples, trying to dismiss the interaction humans were curious by nature. It meant nothing. Still, her hands moved with less rigidity as she arranged the pollen specimens. Through her protective gloves she could feel the slight tremor in her fingers. 2 hands, 5 digits each, not so different from human hands despite the scales and slightly more pronounced claws. That evening in her quarters, Nishka removed her visor and stared into the mirror. Yellow eyes with vertical pupils gazed back, set in a face covered with fine scales that shifted from emerald to teal depending on the light. Her jaw frills flared slightly with her exhale. This is why you stay hidden, she whispered to herself in her native tongue, the sounds rich and melodic without the translator. No human could look at this face and see anything but an alien. Yet as she prepared for sleep, the memory of Elias's thoughtfulness lingered in the darkness. She allowed herself to wonder if perhaps, just perhaps, there was one human aboard Helios who might see beyond the scales. 3 weeks passed with a rhythm that had become almost comfortable for Mishka. Each morning she secured her visor, checked her translator, and made her way to the xenobiology lab, where the humans greeted her with professional courtesy but maintained their distance, and each day there were the small signs of Elias's attention, tools arranged just so, equipment calibrated to her preferences, and occasionally a steaming cup of a beverage the humans called coffee waiting at her station. She'd been hesitant to try it at first, but had grown to appreciate the bitter warmth through her specially designed feeding tube that connected discreetly to her visor. Today something different waited beside her microscope, a small note, handwritten on actual paper, a rarity in space. Thought you might find this interesting. It read in neat script. Beside the note sat a specimen container with what appeared to be a hybrid plant. Structure unlike anything in the station's official research catalog. Nishka glanced around the lab, but Ls was nowhere to be seen. She carefully opened the container and extracted the specimen with her gloved hands. It was beautiful, a crystalline structure with organic elements intertwined, refracting light in patterns that reminded her of the ceremonial gardens on her home world. Hours later, as she was documenting its unusual properties, the lab's primary environmental system suddenly failed. Alarms blared as backup systems engaged. Everyone remained calm. Dr. Tanner announced, "Standard procedure systems are stabilizing." Just as the words left his mouth, Nishka's primary analysis station sparked violently. She jumped back, but not before a surge damaged part of her visor's connection system. Panic flooded her as she felt the environmental seal weaken. "Enter Nishka, are you all right?" Dr. Tanner called from across the room. "Functional," she managed, though her translator glitched, giving her voice an unusual cadence. "Station damage." Before anyone else could respond, the lab doors hissed open and Elias rushed in, toolkit in hand. He moved directly to Nishka station. "I monitored the surge from maintenance, knew it would hit this section first," he explained, already working on the damaged equipment. Then more quietly he added, "Your visor, is it compromised?" Nishka's heart raced. "Connection damage. Environmental integrity at 87%. His eyes met her visor, concern evident. "I can fix that too, if you'll let me." For a long moment Nishka hesitated. No human had ever touched her visor. The thought of Ellis being so close to her face, even with the barrier between them, sent a flutter of anxiety through her chest. "It is necessary," she finally conceded as the other researchers focused on salvaging their work. Elias guided Nishka to a quieter corner of the lab. His hands moved with surprising gentleness as he repaired the external connection points of her visor. "You don't actually need this for breathing, do you?" he asked softly, his question barely audible above the hum of the backup systems. Nishka stiffened. "What makes you believe that?" A small smile played at his lips. "The atmospheric composition reports for your quarters standard settings, not the modified environment most Sarvas request. Plus, I've noticed you adjust your visor most often when new humans enter the lab, not when environmental conditions change." Heat rose to Nishka's face, causing her scales to flush a deeper green beneath her visor. "You are unusually observant. Part of the job." His fingers worked deftly on a particularly delicate connection. "But I'm also curious by nature." "Curiosity about other species can lead to disappointment," she said carefully. Elias's hands paused momentarily, or to understanding. He completed the repair and stepped back. "There should be functioning at optimal levels now." Nishka ran a diagnostic and nodded. "Thank you, your assistance is appreciated." "The specimen I left, did you find it interesting?" he asked, changing the subject as he packed away his tools. "Very. It appears to be a silicon organic hybrid." "Where did you locate it?" His face lit up. "Maintenance shaft 37B. There's a small breach in the exterior plating that's been sealed with a temporary patch. Something about the combination of the station's exterior coating and the solar radiation has created a microenvironment. I found several specimens growing there." Nishka couldn't help the excitement that escaped into her voice. "That could represent an entirely new form of adaptive tenobotany. The implications for cross-species hybridization research are significant." Ilis grinned, clearly pleased by her reaction. "I thought so too. There's more if you interested." "Offshift, I mean, I could show you." The invitation hung between them, a bridge extending beyond professional courtesy into something more personal. Nishka's instinct was to retreat, to protect herself from the inevitable moment when he would see her face and recoil, but another part of her, a part she rarely acknowledged, yearned for connection. "Perhaps," she said finally, "when this system malfunction is resolved, I'll look forward to it." Elias's smile remained warm and seemingly genuine. As he turned to leave, he added, "By the way, I like your voice better without the translator smoothing it out. The natural cadence is musical." After he left, Nishka remained motionless, processing his words. No one had ever described any aspect of her as musical before. She turned back to the crystalline specimen, but her mind kept returning to the human's gentle hands and the way his eyes seemed to look through her visor, as if trying to see what lay beneath. That night, in the privacy of her quarters, she practiced saying his name in her native tongue, the syllables flowing like water over stones, and wondered what it might be like to hear him speak her name in return without the barrier of her visor between them. "Helia Station Anniversary Celebration," read the station-wide announcement that flashed across Nishka's personal terminal. "All personnel invited to commemorate 3 Earth years Of interspecies research cooperation. Nishka dismissed the notification with a flick of her clawed finger. Such gatherings were not for her. The music too loud, the lights too bright, the potential for unwanted attention too great. She had successfully avoided similar events throughout her 4-month tenure on the station. Her door chimed, interrupting her thoughts when it slid open. Elias stood there, his dark curls particularly unruly, as if he'd been running his hands through them nervously. "Good evening," he said, holding up a small container. "I brought another specimen. This one's changing color patterns in response to sonic vibrations." Their informal research partnership had flourished over the past weeks. Elias would bring unusual specimens from remote areas of the station, and Nishka would analyze them, documenting properties that often defied conventional xenoanical classification. They had developed a comfortable rhythm of collaboration, though Nishka still wore a visor during every interaction. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. Her quarters were sparsely decorated, say, for a wall hanging of Sarvakian mineral art and several specimens they had previously studied together. Elias placed the container on her work surface but seemed distracted, his eyes darting around the room before finally settling somewhere just left of her visor. "Is something wrong with the specimen?" she asked. "No, the specimen is fine. I actually had another reason for coming by." He took a deep breath. "The anniversary celebration tomorrow. I was wondering if you'd like to attend with me." Nishka went very still, her inner eyelids blinking rapidly behind her visor. "You wish me to accompany you to a social gathering?" "Yes." He shifted his weight. "We've been working together for weeks now, but always in labs or maintenance corridors. I thought it might be nice to experience something different." A complex mix of emotions flooded through her: surprise, fear, and beneath it all a flicker of longing. "These events are very human." "True, but this station is about interspecies cooperation, isn't it?" "Besides," he added with a gentle smile, "I enjoy your company." No one had ever said those words to her before, not on her home world, where her appearance had marked her as an oddity to be tolerated rather than embraced, and certainly not on Helios. "I do not dance," she said finally, the statement serving as both explanation and tentative acceptance. Elias laughed, the sound warming something deep within her. "Neither do I." "Not well. Anyway, we can just talk. Observe the interesting social rituals of my species. Think of it as anthropological research." "Very well," she agreed, trying to sound more confident than she felt for research purposes. His smile widened. "Great, I'll meet you outside the observation deck at 2000 hours." Hours after he left, Nishka stood motionless in the center of her quarters, wondering what she had just agreed to. The prospect of a crowded room filled with humans made her scales tighten anxiously against her skin. Yet when the following evening arrived, she found herself standing outside the observation deck, visor firmly in place, wearing her formal research uniform rather than her usual work attire. The faint pulse of music and conversation emanated from behind the doors. "You came." Elias's voice came from behind her, surprise and pleasure evident in his tone. She turned to find him dressed in what she recognized as human formal wear: dark pants, a blue jacket that complemented his brown skin, and a crisp white shirt. "I said I would," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "You did." He offered his arm, a human custom she recognized from her cultural orientation. "Shall we?" The observation deck had been transformed. The usual stark lighting had been dimmed, replaced by soft illumination that mimicked sunset. Stars shone brilliantly through the vast viewing window while station personnel mingled, drinks in hand. Nishka stayed close to the periphery with Eyeless beside her. He obtained drinks for them both, hers specially designed to be consumed through her visor's feeding attachment. They watched the humans dance, laugh and talk, with Elias occasionally explaining social nuances that escaped her. "Dr. Hastings is attempting to impress Dr. Yubari, but his dance moves suggest he hasn't practiced since his academy days," he commented, eliciting an amused trill from Nishka that her translator couldn't quite flatten. The evening progressed more pleasantly than she had anticipated. Elias introduced her to several of his maintenance colleagues who treated her with unexpected warmth. They were discussing the station's upcoming research initiatives when Nishka overheard a conversation from a nearby group. "Why do they even send the reptilians here?" a male voice slurred slightly. "Half of them hide behind environment suits anyway. If they can't handle human interaction, they should stay in their own sector." Nishka froze, her entire body tensing beside her. Elias had stiffened as well. He'd clearly heard the comment too. "Excuse me," he said quietly to her, then stepped toward the group. "Something to say, Kaveri?" the men challenged as Ellis approached. "Actually, yes." Elias's voice remained level but Carried a steel. Nishka had never heard before. The Sarvaxians are some of the most brilliant xenobiologists in the quadrant. Their presence on this station has advanced our research by decades. Their physical adaptations, which by the way allow them to perceive spectrums of light and chemical compositions we can only measure with technology, make them uniquely qualified for the work we're doing here. The man scoffed. Still creepy looking. That's a remarkably limited perspective, Elias replied coldly. Evolution doesn't prioritize aesthetic appeal to other species, it's about adaptation, survival, efficiency. There's beauty in that purpose if you bother to look deeper. Nishka stood transfixed, barely breathing. Elias wasn't aware she was listening, yet he was defending not just her species but finding beauty in the very features she had been taught to hide. The confrontation dissipated as station security officers drifted closer. But the impact of Elias's words lingered. When he returned to her side, she couldn't find words to express the emotion flooding through her. I apologize for that, he said. Some people bring their prejudices even into space. You defended my species, she said softly. Elias's expression softened. Of course I did. He was wrong and ignorant. In that moment, looking at him beneath the stars, Nishka began to question everything she had assumed about human perceptions. Perhaps the distance she had felt from others wasn't entirely due to her appearance. Perhaps it was the wall she had built, the visor she insisted on wearing even when it wasn't necessary. Would you like to see the maintenance corridor where I found the sonic responsive specimen? Elias asked, offering her an escape from the crowded room. Yes, she answered, grateful for his understanding as they slipped away from the celebration, walking side by side through the quieter corridors of the station. Mishka felt something shifting inside her, a tentative hope that perhaps there was one human who might see beyond her scales. To the person beneath, red emergency lights bathed the corridor as Nishka raced toward the environmental control hub. The station's automated warning system blared overhead. Warning: atmospheric regulation system compromised in sectors 7 through 9. All non-essential personnel evacuate. Immediately. She had been in the laboratory when the alarms began, analyzing the latest specimens with Dr. Tanner. The initial diagnostic suggested a cascading failure in the environmental systems, potentially catastrophic for a space station housing hundreds of crew members from a dozen different species. Enter Nishka. Dr. Tanner had said urgently, your species has superior resistance to atmospheric fluctuations. We need someone to access the manual override in Hub 9 while we stabilize the main systems. Without hesitation she had volunteered, knowing that her Sarvakian physiology could indeed withstand toxic gas exposure better than humans. As she rounded the corner to Sector 8, she nearly collided with a figure in a maintenance uniform. Ellis, she exclaimed, recognizing him instantly despite the emergency lighting. Nishka, relief flooded his features. I was headed to find you. Sector 9 is completely compromised. Methane buildup from a ruptured filtration system. I must reach the environmental hub, she explained. Dr. Tanner needs manual override activation to prevent system-wide failure. Determination settled on his face. I'm coming with you. The atmosphere. I have this. He held up an emergency breathing apparatus, not as comprehensive as your visor, but it will do. Together they proceeded through the increasingly hazardous corridors. Warning lights flashed more urgently as they approached Sector 9. The station groaned around them, metal contracting under stress. The hug should be just ahead, Elias said, voice muffled by his breathing mask. They reached a sealed door marked Environmental Control Hub 9. Ilis quickly interfaced with the security panel, overriding the lockdown protocols. The door slid open, releasing a hiss of pressurized air inside. Chaos greeted them. A rupture in one of the main atmospheric processing units had caused a chain reaction. Sparks flew from damaged consoles. Toxic vapor filled the air. The manual override is there. Nishka pointed to a sealed compartment across the room. We must activate it and realign the atmospheric balance before the contamination spreads further. They moved deeper into the hub, Nishka navigating through the toxic haze with her enhanced vision while Elias followed close behind. They had almost reached the override panel when an explosion rocked the station. A secondary filtration unit had failed, sending shrapnel through the air. Nishka felt something strike her visor with tremendous force. The impact sent her stumbling backward. Elias caught her, studying her. Are you hurt? He asked urgently. She ran a quick diagnostic, functional, but she stopped as her visor system flashed warning indicators across her field of vision. The integrity of her visor had been compromised. A crack ran from top to bottom. Your visor, Elias said, concern evident in his voice. It is damaged but still operational. She tried to sound confident, but panic fluttered in her chest. Her shield, her protection Was failing. We need to complete the override, she said, pushing her fear aside. They worked together, Ellis handling the mechanical systems while Nishka input the complex atmospheric recalibration codes. Almost there, Ellis muttered as he connected the final circuits. The override panel hummed to life and the station's automated system announced manual override accepted. Initiating atmospheric purge and restoration. Relief flooded through them both as the toxic haze began to clear, sucked away by the emergency ventilation systems. But as the immediate danger passed, Nishka became acutely aware of her damaged visor. The crack had widened and her visor systems were failing. We should return to the main section, she said, turning toward the door. Ellis nodded. But as they moved to leave, the damaged visor finally gave way with a sharp electronic whine. Its systems shut down completely. Nishka froze, her hands rising instinctively to her face. The protective barrier that had hidden her features for months was useless now. She turned away from Elias, panic overwhelming her. Nishka, his voice was gentle behind her. Are you all right? My visor is non-functional, she said, her natural voice emerging without the translator's modulation. The sibilant quality of her speech was more pronounced now, the musical undertones evident. You should proceed to safety. I will follow when I can arrange for replacement equipment. I'm not leaving you here, he said firmly, and you don't need the visor to breathe. Remember, I've known that for weeks. She remained facing away from him. It is not about breathing. There was a long pause before Elias spoke again, his voice softer. Is it about me seeing your face? Nishka's heart thundered in her chest. This moment, the moment she had dreaded since arriving on Helios, had come. There was nowhere to hide, no way to maintain the barrier she had so carefully constructed. Slowly she turned to face him, her yellow eyes meeting his directly. For the first time without the visor between them, she watched as he took in her features, the emerald scales that shimmered with iridescent highlights in the emergency lighting, the pronounced ridges above her eyes, the delicate frills that lined her jaw and flared slightly with each anxious breath. She waited for the revulsion, the shock, the polite attempt to hide discomfort that she had seen countless times before. Instead, Elias simply looked at her, his eyes moving over her features with undisguised curiosity and something else, something that made her breath catch. So that's what you've been hiding, he said softly, all this time. Nishka's frills flattened against her neck, a sign of embarrassment in her species. My features are unusual even by Sarvaxan standards. Elias stepped closer, his eyes never leaving her face. There. Remarkable, he said. To her astonishment, he smiled, a warm, genuine expression that reached his eyes. I've been wondering what you looked like for months. You are not repulsed? The question escaped before she could stop it. His eyebrows drew together in confusion. Repulsed? Why would I be? I am not. She struggled to find the words conventionally appealing by either human or Sarvaxian standards. Understanding dawned in his eyes. That's why you wear the visor, not for environmental protection at all. She nodded, unable to speak. Elias shook his head slightly. Nishka, I've been trying to find ways to spend time with you for months. I bring you specimens, I calibrate your equipment, I invite you to station events. Did you really think your appearance would change how I feel about you? Her yellow eyes widened. How you feel? He took another step closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. Would you like to have dinner with me sometime? He asked, a slight nervousness in his voice that she had never heard before. Without the visor, just you and me. Stunned, she could only whisper, even like this. His smile widened and he reached out, his fingers hovering near but not quite touching the scales along her jawline. Exactly like this, he said softly. Especially like this. In that moment, as emergency systems continued to hum around them and the distant sounds of repair crews echoed down the corridor, something long frozen within Nishka began to thaw. For the first time since arriving on Helios, perhaps for the first time in her life, she allowed herself to believe that someone could see her, truly see her, and still want to be near. Yes, she said finally, her natural voice melodic with emotion. I would like that very much. The observation deck of Helios Station was nearly empty at this late hour. Through its vast windows, the galaxy sprawled in luminous splendor, stars scattered like diamond dust across the velvet dark. Nishka stood before this celestial display, her scaled face bare, emerald skin reflecting the starlight. It's breathtaking, isn't it? Elias said, joining her at the window. No matter how many times I see it, I never get used to it. On my home world there is a saying, Nishka replied, her natural voice now unfiltered by technology. The stars remind us how small our differences truly are. 3 months had passed since the environmental system crisis. 3 months since she had first shown her face to Ilis. 3 months of gradual Sometimes difficult but always meaningful change. Their first dinner together had been in his quarters away. From curious eyes she had arrived still wearing her visor, removing it only after the door closed behind her. They had talked for hours, sharing stories of their home worlds, their families there. Journeys to Helios Station. You have a dimple when you smile, he had observed, causing her frills to flutter and what she now allowed him to recognize as embarrassment. Right here, he had pointed to his own cheek to show her it is a scale malformation. She had explained another imperfection, it's distinctive, he had countered, unique like you. In the weeks that followed, Nishka had begun appearing without her visor in small controlled settings, the xenobiology lab during off hours, the less frequented research corridors, the hydroponics bay where they continued to study the unusual specimens. Each step had required courage, each moment of exposure leaving her feeling vulnerable yet increasingly liberated. There had been stares, of course, whispers, a few uncomfortable encounters with crew members and used to seeing a Sarva's features up close, but there had also been acceptance, curiosity, and in some cases genuine appreciation. Dr. Tanner had been particularly surprising. Your visual processing must be extraordinary, he had commented after observing her unvisored eyes tracking subtle color changes in a specimen. We've been underutilizing your natural abilities. Now standing beside Elias on the observation deck, Nishka felt a sense of peace that had eluded her for most of her life. Her reflective gaze shifted from the stars to his profile. What are you thinking about? He asked, turning to meet her eyes. How different things would be if I had maintained my barriers, she admitted. If my visor had not been damaged that day. Elias smiled, reaching out to take her hand, his fingers intertwined with hers. Human skin warm against her scales. I'd like to think we would have gotten here eventually. I'm persistent. Yes, she agreed, her frills rippling with amusement. Stubbornly so. Their relationship had evolved with a careful tenderness. Each touch had been a new discovery, her scales smooth and warm beneath his fingertips, his skin surprisingly soft against her palm. Their first kiss had been hesitant, an exploration of different physiologies, finding harmony. Now of such moments came naturally, their differences enhancing rather than hindering their connection. I received a communication from the Xenobiological Institute today, Nishka said, turning more fully toward him. They have reviewed my research on the silicon organic hybrids we discovered. They are impressed, as they should be, Elias said with pride. Your analysis was brilliant. They have offered me a permanent position here on Helios. Her yellow eyes searched his face for reaction. As a senior researcher rather than an intern, I would lead a new division focused on adaptive cinemabogy. Joy spread across his features. Nishka, that's incredible. You deserve it more than anyone. I have accepted the position, she said, her voice carrying the musical loaf that he had come to love. I will be staying. Ellis pulled her closer, wrapping his arms around her. She relaxed against him, her head fitting perfectly against his shoulder. They had learned the choreography of their embrace, how to accommodate her frills, how she could rest against him comfortably. I was hoping you would, he whispered. A comfortable silence settled between them as they gazed out at the stars. So much had changed in 6 months. Nishka thought of the frightened intern who had arrived at Helios hiding behind a visor and layers of protective emotional armor. That version of herself seemed like a stranger now. There will still be challenges, she said softly. Not everyone will understand. True, Elias acknowledged. My parents, for instance, were quite surprised when I told them about us. Mishka pulled back slightly to look at him. You have told your family about me? Of course. His expression was warm. I told them I'd met someone extraordinary, someone with the most beautiful eyes I've ever seen and a mind that continually amazes me. Her scales flushed a deeper green at his words, and they were accepting. They were surprised, curious, and then excited to meet you. My mother particularly wants to know about Sarvaxian culture. He brushed his fingers gently along her jaw. People can surprise you if you give them the chance. As you surprised me, she acknowledged. We might face some prejudice, he continued, from both our species, but we'll face it together. The word resonated within her. On her home world she had always been set apart, her distinctive features marking her as different here. Paradoxically, her alien nature had ultimately led her to belonging. I brought something for you, Elias said. Reaching into his pocket he withdrew a small object, a crystalline structure similar to the first specimen he had given her, but this one had been carefully shaped and polished, hanging from a delicate chain. It's from the original hybrid we found, he explained. I worked with the materials lab to preserve it. I thought you might like to have a reminder of where we began. Nishka took the pendant, watching as it caught the starlight and refracted it into patterns across her scales. It's beautiful, like you, he said simply. She looked up at him, this human who had seen Past her protective barriers who had been patient enough to wait for her to lower them herself. I never imagined this would be possible, she admitted, to be seen and cherished. I see you, Nishka, he said softly. All of you. He leaned down as she tilted her face up to his, their lips meeting in a kiss that still held wonder even after all these months. His hands cradled her face gently, thumbs stroking the scales along her cheekbones. When they parted, she kept her eyes closed for a moment, savoring the sensation. When she opened them, she found him watching her with a tenderness that still had the power to take her breath away. What happens now? She asked. Now, he smiled, we continue exploring the station. The stars, each other together behind them. The doors to the observation deck opened, and a group of station personnel entered, engaged in conversation. Months ago, Nishka would have reached instinctively for her visor, would have turned away or fled. Now she remained where she was, her face visible, her hand in Elias's. A few of the newcomers nodded in greeting. Others barely noticed them. One young researcher approached with questions about Nishka's recent publication. She answered confidently, her natural voice carrying easily across the space, her frills moving expressively as she spoke. Later, as they walked back toward their quarters, Ella squeezed her hand. Proud of you, he said simply. Nishka's frills rippled in pleasure. She no longer needed a translation device to understand what he meant, nor did she need a visor to hide who she was. The path ahead might hold challenges, but she would face them openly. Her true self revealed. Her scales caught the light from overhead, shimmering with iridescent highlights as they walked. Once she had seen only flaws in their pattern. Now, of seeing them reflected in Elias's admiring gaze, she recognized what he had known from the beginning, that beneath the scales and because of them she was exactly who she was meant to